And we're here with a brand new episode of the Dreamer Comics podcast. I'm your host, Omar Spahi, and today we have a funkadelic guest with us, Scott Koblish.
Hey.
You are the artist for Deadpool, Renew Your Vows.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of my personal favorites, The Many Deaths of Scott Koblish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been drawing comics for a long, long time, so it's a lot of fun to keep pumping out stuff. Hopefully everyone likes it. You know? Yeah.
I love it. And what was your kind of like first experiences with comics growing up?
My first experience with comics was sort of through animation, like on the television. Like I would watch, the Batman show on the TV, or there was an animated Spider-Man show that I really liked, and then I found out that there were comic books of those characters, and I was just like, oh, let's do this, and it was really awesome because you could sit there with a comic book no matter what time of day or night. This is before, TiVo or on-demand stuff. So like if you missed the Batman show or if you missed the Spider-Man, that was it. It was gone. But your comics were always there for you. So
you could always go back and read them and pick them up.
Absolutely.
Did you end up going to a comic book store, or how did you know to go pick up Spider-Man and Batman?
I was sick, and my mom would have brought back a whole bunch. Like I don't know, there was a local store, Heroes World in town. So this is in New Jersey. And then I would pick them up once I found comics. There was like two places in Chatham and Cape Cod, where I grew up, and there was two places. One had more Marvels and one had more DCs. And one was like near the post office, or was the post office or something like that. And the other place was like a little 5 and dime kind of shop. And I would just pick up comics as many as I could, and then I decided like when I was 7 that I wanted to be a comic artist.
No way, you were that young?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is plan A. Still.
I love it.
But there was a school near me in New Jersey, in Dover, that was the Kubert School, Joe Kubert School. And Joe used to teach these Saturday classes. So I started going from when I was 9 until like 15 or 16. So.
Wow. So like 6-7 years just going there.
Absolutely.
I mean, this was at the time you were just barely like getting into high school. You were getting
middle school,
high school.
I was still, middle school, elementary school. Absolutely. Yeah, I was just drawing all the time. So, yeah, Joe used to teach the classes, and then Mike Chen taught the classes, and Mike wound up being the guy who runs the school now, or nearly runs it. I don't know exactly how that works, but
that's crazy. And so, what did you end up going to that school, or would you by the time you were?
No, by the time that I was kind of like in high school, I was like, well, I got this. So I figured I knew what they were going to teach me. So like, and I wanted to kind of get out of Jersey. So like, I went to SVA in New York for cartooning, and there I studied under Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman and Sal Amendola, a couple other people, Joe Orlando, things like that. So,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's
some legends there.
Yeah. They were teaching at the time, so it's funny. Like you meet these people, you sort of you're a student of them, and they know you, but you don't really know them. Like there's a whole teacher-student dynamic that you're never going to really be able to get away from.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely the names are. I mean, I'm kind of like a prize puppy. Like my pedigree is real long.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But it doesn't matter unless you do actually something with it.
Absolutely. So. That's the world we live in. It's you have to put in the work and put in the learning process. So.
Exactly. I mean, I learned a lot from the people that I was around, but I mean, I don't know, because I started so early being taught. I had a lot of difficulty in these classes because I was like somewhat advanced. But, there's a difference between, like, knowing things at 9 years old and being able to put them in practice when you're 22.
Yeah.
There's, like, a little difference going on there.
Of course.
But it always threw me off a little bit because I knew too much about it. not enough about it. I don't know how to describe that. I'm still always learning about everything I do.
I think that's the way we all are. We're all always learning, and it's impossible to be 100% perfect all the time. We're all human.
No, well, it's those mistakes that wind up being your style.
Of course.
You know, like it's like everyone's always trying to ape the thing that they love, like whether it's an artist or just a style or something like that. And it's those mistakes, those things that you can't quite get right that wind up being you. It's the things that you can't get away from. So
that's what makes you you. It's like your fingerprint, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's your fingerprint, yeah. But everyone's always trying to be somebody else.
Absolutely. And so that's so funny. What was it to you that you felt like you had done like to kind of grow your style? Like was there one particular day or thing that you had realized, okay, I'm getting it now. Like I'm taking it to this. I think I'm able to do this as a profession.
Well, my style has changed. It changes even sometimes by project. So like the style I do for the comic, The Many Deaths, is way different than the Deadpool stuff that I do, and way different from many of the other things that I did before too. I did a book called The Jetpack Pets for Disney Adventures magazine. That was way different too. It was very cartoony.
Yeah.
So I think that what winds up happening is that for me, I'm a real chameleon, and that's kind of unusual in comics. Like most comic artists, they kind of have a style that they can never ever get away from. It's just who they are. So like a Robert Crumb or a Howard Chaykin or a John Byrne or a Jaime Hernandez, like they just draw like a certain way, and they'll never be able to draw like out of that.
Of course.
But for whatever reason, and I'm still not sure exactly why this keys in with me, but for whatever reason, like I'm as close to a chameleon as you can possibly get. And I think it kind of throws people. I think that there's an impression about style that makes everyone think that you're being honest, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. So like I'll be able to draw like a Rob Liefeld or as close as I can, or a John Byrne or as close as I can, or a Jaime Hernandez like as close as I can, but like it's not as if I'm doing it out of any like I'm not trying to trick anybody. It's just that I'm restless as an artist. I'm like, there was a interview that Madonna had done right around the time that Aretha Franklin died, and Aretha Franklin had died, and Madonna was just praising her, and someone had a criticism about Madonna having been an appropriator of other styles and other people's music, and that she had no core, and that it was almost like a shame that like she had no way to hold a candle to anything that Aretha Franklin had done. And I thought that that's just like a really self-centered view of, I thought that it's the people who they're kind of mercurial or kind of they can change protein. Yeah. Like those people are completely misunderstood. So I think I fall accidentally into that that place.
It's really interesting because you talk about like whenever you kind of like a chameleon, like everyone and everything comes from something.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and most people just sort of hone in on a thing, and then they just try like.
And this is my thing, and I'm not going to change it.
Absolutely. Well, even you get sculpture that honed in on the old Greek sculpture. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no way to get around that kind of stuff. But but I don't know that anybody holds Da Vinci up and says like,
this is the only way to do it.
He's sculpting or painting like the old Greeks.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's just like
this is how it is.
Yeah, this is how it is. There's a value to having a thread, like being able to pick up the thread and move along with it. But like I say, I'm restless, so I get different itches at different times. So
I love it. I mean, that's it's a testament to how good you are, and like you can mimic all these other styles and make them your own.
Yeah, well, and I think part of I'd done a lot of inking for a long time, so you have to sit in another artist's style and marinate in it for like a little bit. Like not every kind of line works well with every kind of artist. So I mean, inking's it's a tough sport. it's not something that I would recommend to anybody. You
Yeah.
know? It's just a lot of pencilers don't know how to ink.
Yeah.
So
You have to.
like,
You have to. What's the? How would you describe the difference between penciling and inking? Like,
oh yeah, so penciling, like you have a lot more control over everything. Inking, you're just a backseat driver, screaming like left, left, left. You know, like there's not much you can do. There's a couple guys that are they're very heavy as far as like what they could do with the work, like a Klaus Janson or an Al Williamson. Like you knew that those guys had come in, or a Bob Layton. Like you knew that those guys had come in. They had a certain thing on their desk at the beginning, and they changed it.
yeah.
Like it wound up being something completely different at the end. Bill Sienkiewicz, that's another person that I would sort of categorize in that category. But I was never that strong an inker, and I was always just trying to serve the story. So as a penciler, like I get a lot more joy, like helping to create the story and serve it more than inking. You're kind of you're almost like the editor of the artwork. You're the last person that touches it, really, before the colorist, at least. And you know, it's whatever value judgments or judgments that you make about it that sort of finish it off. But you know, it's a kind of it's a lot like having a music producer. You can have like a song that someone will come in, like an Avril Lavigne will come in, and then like they'll have a song that they've written, and then the producer will kind of shape it. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll say like, oh, we should have drums here or tom toms here, or like you know, Wurlitzer here, and those kind of recommendations, those kind of things, like wind up changing the flavor of the song. But someone's come along and made the song in the beginning, you know. So these work for hire things, especially, like they're just kind of they're piecemeal, you know. Or it's not really piecemeal. It's just a group effort.
Yeah,
you know. So you get lots of. If everybody's on the same page, it can be amazing. If everybody's not on the same page, it can be amazing too.
But it can be
a difficult kind of thing. Some editors like to be Dr. Frankenstein, so they'll put like Sal Buscema together with Bill Sienkiewicz and get some kind of different creature. You know what I mean? But you know, it's catch as catch can. Sometimes that's a good idea. Sometimes it's not.
Now, whenever you're creating that, so someone comes into you like a blind pitch, say like, okay, I have this idea. It's about you know, a story about hell for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Do you go and say, okay, I'm going to do the story that's going to serve the theme of this best, and this is what style I'm thinking about?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There was a story that was in a Not Brand X at Not Brand X. It's like it was a humor stuff.
Okay.
It was a humor magazine that Marvel put out in the 70s or 60s, and then they revived it recently. They threw out like and I think that they wanted me, when they gave me the script, it was like a 7-pager. When they gave me the script, I think they were expecting it to be kind of serious and like a moody kind of piece. But I loved Marie Severin and Wally Wood's takes on the superhero genre in the 70s and 60s. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go full bore and do that sort of thing. I handed it in, and the editor was like, not what I expected, but awesome nonetheless. So, you know, like I use my judgment. Like I'm not going to like try and do like a funny animal book, like if I'm like doing an Iron Man comic or something like that, you know, but it does throw people off. I try not to be like, you know, like, haha, here you go. You know, this is what you deserve, you know. Of course, I'm going to follow whatever is happening on the story. But,
of course.
Yeah.
I love it. That's so much fun. So what was your first kind of like journey into like paid comic book work? What was your first like paid comic book gig?
When I left SVA, I had a portfolio, but it just fell on deaf ears. And I managed to get my portfolio in front of John Romita Sr., and John was, I didn't know this at the time, but he was the art director over at Marvel. And, you know, I sent him my artwork. He said, can you change this, this, and this? And I was like, that's kind of an odd request. But I was like, yeah, I can change these things. Sent it back in. I just kept bugging him. And he was like, there's a fine line between, you know, asking for work and being a pest.
Yep.
And you're a pest right now. And I didn't hear, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. Like I went away. I had all these other terrible jobs, like, you know, delivering or trying to sell sports bloopers door to door and
Sports
business.
bloopers?
Oh, absolutely. It was
love
an
it.
awesome job. Yeah, sports bloopers was great. I would go up to, I had a whole spiel. You go up to every business. And you don't bother with houses like homes because everybody's at work. So you go to the offices. So you go to the office, and I would say like, oh, we've got this, makes a great Christmas present, $20. If you have a few friends that you can pool together, I'll give you one for free. You know, and it would work. Like the secretary would just there's these secretaries, I swear to God, in all these offices that they would just like they would be like, great. Like they knew the drill. I don't know how it worked, but then they would run off. They would get like 10 of their friends, and then you'd come back like a couple days later, and they'd be like, "Here you go, you know, I got 10. Order for 10. Can I get like 2 for free?" And you'd be like, "Let's do it," you know, like. So anyway, so I was doing that for a long time, and finally Marvel called. They said, "We have this job." It was a Romita Raider, which was working under John Romita. And it was art corrections department at Marvel. And so my first real published work is just fixing things like Spider-Man's webs. You know, you'd be surprised the stuff people would draw that was wrong. Or censorship issues like there was a whole bunch of Conans that they were reprinting, and there was boobies. So I had to go in and I had to put in like like gold plate over their breasts, or like cloth or things like that, and do it in a wash and whatnot. So that was fun to do. And you were in the offices, or I was in the offices. I don't know why I switched to second person there, but I was in the offices, and it was a lot of fun. It was great. I mean, Marvel, the offices were amazing to work in. And there was just a real camaraderie between everybody. I mean, some of these people are still my friends.
I love it.
So, and then I started getting freelance. They picked up the phone one
day and they just said, "Okay, we need you." Like,
I was literally. Oh man, the sports blooper job was killing me slowly because it was 80% rejection easily, like 90% rejection, and then you'd get like 5% sales, and then like. 2% would call the cops. So like, actually, I had a good start. There was one time I was in this one town. It was around Christmas, and they called. I wound up going to the elementary school just to find the office, but the office wasn't like really easily findable, so I had to wander around the school for a little bit. So I think they called the cops or something like that, and the cops pulled me over, and they kept me there for, oh my God, like 5 hours just sitting there, and I didn't have time to do this. I was like, I got to drop the tapes. So, but they didn't arrest me or anything like that, but I was really torqued. And I looked up on the map to find out where the police station was, and I drove right to the police station, went up to desk sergeant, and I said, "I hear you guys are interested in my product." And I plopped it down, and I sold 3 tapes.
Yes.
So I was like...
way to turn lemons, take lemons
Absolutely,
and turn them into lemonade.
But the job was killing me slowly. So what would wind up happening is that I was just like, I would leave and I would just be like nearly in tears. Well, I was literally in tears, like just getting, because the rejection was so intense.
Of course.
So, and then I got a call, and I had to call from a payphone in order to call Marvel back. So I gave him a call and I said, when do you want me to start? And they were like, January 4th. And I was like, I'm there. Like, you got it. And then it was a big fall, though. I was making like $1,500 a week, and then I went down to making, I think it was $125 a week or something like that.
You're talking about less than 10% even.
It was 35 hours during the week because they were like, well, you take a lunch break. So, and then it was, it was minimum wage. Yeah, it was really intense. It was $4.25 an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was getting as much as a ditch digger in Texas. Yeah, so it was intense. But it was great to be there. Like, that was the really important thing. Because you're in front of everybody, you get to show them your portfolio, you show them what you do.
You build these connections with people.
Absolutely. There's people there that I know to this day. I was just in DC's offices the other day, and there's people I've known for like forever now. So it's just amazing. And then what's really funny is the people who are have come into the industry. They're like, I'm terrified of that person. I'm like, Marie, really?
Yeah. You're like, I've known her forever.
Yeah, I've known her forever. Why would you be scared of Marie? So,
I love it.
Not singling out Marie, but you know what I mean.
So what was after that? Like, how did it transition into getting more and more work? Like, what?
Yeah. Well, so I was there as a raider, and I remember distinctly. I was doing background inks for Keith Williams on some old Ravage 2099s and some Silver Surfer comics and things like that. So I was picking up the skills enough to know. I knew how to ink beforehand, but I was picking up the every day. You'd help do backgrounds. Keith would do the main figure, and I'd do the backgrounds on it, just on a few pages here and there, whatever. Because the thing about comics is it's just like you're like quick. For God's sakes, we're late. And there was an editor. I still remember this day. He came up. He was the one who was in charge of the Marvel Comics Presents book, and those were 8-page stories. And he came up and he goes, "Do you ink?" He's from Australia, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll ink, yeah." And I had a rate. They established a rate for me, and they established a really terrible pencil rate. They were almost exactly the same amount. It was like $60 for each. Oh. And I had an editor friend that was like, ask for a raise every chance you get. Yeah. So every 6 months I asked for a raise, and it just kept going, and then it stalled out and it stayed the same for the last like 20 years. But still, it was just fun to just do the work back then. Of course. I still there's reprints of these things that pop up every once in a while, or I got a Doom 2099 reprint. It'd been like 17 years since the book had died out, and you're just like, they're trying to keep the trademark. So every 17 years, you got to do that to keep the trademark.
Oh, really? I thought it was 75 years, not 75.
No. Well, no, this is trademark as opposed to copyright.
Yeah. Got it. Different.
So if you're publishing something every 17 years, you got to put something out. That's why, suddenly, for no apparent reason, you got to put it on the cover, the title of the person, character, and go The Return of Starbrand, you know what I mean? So,
and people are like,
yeah, and they get all excited because they're like, oh wow, this would be great, but of course they just need to keep the trademark in, and then you're just like, whatever happened to that book? I thought it was pretty good, but you get 6 months out of it. So that's kind of what happens now, unless you get a really good Starbrand book. You could get a Starbrand book that would be good, right?
Yeah, you could.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I would do a Quasar book in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Quasar would be fun.
Yeah, Quasar would be really fun, right?
What was your journey into going from that to now going to Deadpool?
Oh, so I did a lot of inking throughout the 90s, and then I wound up going to Stanley Media out here in California. And
what was Stanley Media?
Stanley Media was an animation company, sort of, but it was like an internet company.
Okay.
So this is back when internet was kind of new.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? I still remember there was an interview with Stan and Larry King, and Larry King was like, okay, just go to stanley.com, and Stan had to go stanley.net. And because some jeweler in Texas owned stanley.com. So we had stanley.net, and Stan was like, stanley.net, and then Larry was thrown. I mean, he had never heard anything like this. Yeah, he was like, .net, what's that? And they were like, boiled down to that's what the kids do now, .net. But it was just it was just because someone had Stanley Jeweler,
I love it.
So, he had sort of plopped himself down in that domain. So, but anyway, it was an internet company, and we did essentially little 3-minute long animations, and it was very limited. It was all in Flash, which was sort of a new technique, a new platform at the time. I don't even know if people use Flash for anything anymore. But
no, they still do. People
okay,
Flash animation.
Great. So that was it. It was all Flash animation, and you'd work on the program, do the best you could to make it kind of interesting. There was a voiceover talent, and there was music, and there was all sorts of stuff. And then because it was 28.8-bit, it took forever for it to download. So you'd wait 8 minutes for it to download a 2.5-minute episode. So it didn't go over that well. We were ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And the company kind of collapsed. I don't know if there were shenanigans. I guess there were shenanigans. People wound up in jail, but not Stan. And Stan had nothing to do with it.
Sounds like
Peter Paul wound up in jail. So, and then they got tied in with the Clintons. I don't know. It was really weird. Anyway,
wait, how did they get tied in with the Clintons?
Well, there was Peter Paul, the guy who was he was part of the company. He was one of the founders of the company. Mm-hmm. He wanted to. He had been convicted years before of a federal crime of trying to bring things across the embargo from Cuba into the U.S.
Okay.
So, like, he tried to get, like, $17 million worth of stuff into the U.S.
All right.
But he said to people that he was, like, working for the CIA, but I don't know if that was true because they arrested him. Like the FBI, like, totally arrested him.
Yeah, they're like, no, that's not true.
I don't really know what the truth is on that one. But anyway, he had this criminal record, and I guess it had really been nagging at him for forever. And this is in 2000 after the Clintons were just about to leave the White House, but Hillary was going to run for Senate. So she was running for Senate, and they did a fundraiser. Stanley Media did a fundraiser, and he was trying to do a quid pro quo, like he would get a pardon, for his crimes. And then, they raised like $2.5 million for Hillary. Wow. And then the company collapsed, of course, and he fled to Brazil. So, of course, like everybody who was just like, well, the Clintons are evil, like they honed in on that one, and it was just like,
but I don't think they had anything to do with it.
I think it had nothing to do with it. I mean, they literally, I think they wanted to have Bill like on the board of Stanley Media, but it's because Stan kind of has a whole bunch of trails like these C-list and D-list like movie stars, like right behind him. Like I met Michael Jackson because like he and Stan were really like.
What?
Like
That's awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
This is the coolest thing. Wait, you met Michael Jackson? When did you meet Michael Jackson?
I met Michael Jackson in 2000. Yeah, we walk through the office and there's Michael, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, just,
just hanging out and he's got his hair over his face, you know what I mean? And then when he was walking around in the general populace, he had the little mask thing on because his nose was all chewed up from trying to change his nose. But, he I love your work, that kind of thing. And it was just like, well, thanks. It's so weird. But, Stan had all these people, like, sort of dragging behind him. And just because, Stan is a really charismatic guy. When I was a kid in Dungeons & Dragons, they had, like... they would have powers, like invisibility or strength, and I totally understood those as powers. I was like, those are powers, like super strength, but that charisma. So they had charisma, and as a kid, I was like, charisma's not a power.
No one uses charisma.
No one uses charisma, but what I found out is in real life, charisma is the only power you can really have. I mean, you can change your body and get real strong, but like you still can't lift a car.
No.
But with charisma, you can get 10 people to be on your side, and you can lift the car.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
You
That's
can
the
just
real
go like,
superpower.
the real superpower is raising an army to run behind you.
I love it.
That's exactly it. So charisma is the real thing, and Stan had charisma to spare, just because he was so excited about what he did.
He was super passionate, super
passionate,
super in love with everything he was doing.
Absolutely, really loved what he did. Really loved who he was working with. Always talked highly of everybody. That he worked with. I was surprised that he and Steve Ditko still talked. You know what I mean? Or argued or whatever it was that they did. But absolutely. No, Stan just was like, you would follow him through the gates of hell just because
you were so behind him because he
trusted
what he was doing. So
and he trusted you, and he was really excited about it, So he would just go like, I remember pitching a story idea to him, and, I pitched it for like 15 minutes. He sat back and he was like, that's great. Go do it. Let's do it. And you'd be like, yeah, let's do it.
Let's go right now.
Yeah, let's go. And that can really go far because once you're like excited, you go back to your drawing board, and then you've got to sit there and create the thing over the next month.
And you're like, I'm still doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. As long as you're like excited about it, it makes a huge difference whether or not you're just like, oh no, I have to draw this.
Go back to work and draw this thing.
Yeah. This thing, it's going to be complicated and really long, and I have to get all this reference and detail, and you know what I mean? So it's just a lot of work to do this stuff. So if you're excited about it, it makes a huge difference.
It's so interesting because going back, and I'm a huge Stan Lee fan.
Oh, absolutely.
And I would go back and hear his stories, hear him talk about how he would get a page back and how he would look at the page and he would go up to the artist every time he would get a page and be like, I absolutely love it. This panel is amazing, and I love the way you did this for this thing. And he would go and give artists that kind of feedback and kind of find a way to keep them energized.
Absolutely.
After every time he got a single page back, and I was to show somebody
Yeah.
do that is just
I
incredible.
mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes he'd be cranky.
Of
You know what I
course.
mean? But
we
like
all have our
everybody
good
wakes
days.
up on the wrong side of the bed. But that's exactly it. Yeah, he was really excited about it. He was really passionate about it, and he could get people to really like jump on board. And you could see it in his writing. You could see it in how he approached people
Yeah.
and dealt with people. I never had a bad word to say about him. You know,
So after you were at Stanley Media, what was next for you?
Oh, right. So I fell back into inking. The company collapsed, and I was like, oh. But I had a project that I'd been working on where I was like, I'm going to finish this, and I did my own comic called Skate with a friend of mine, Matt Mora, and we published it. And I took it to San Diego, and everyone was like, and it took me like a year to do because I had all these other assignments. And everyone was like, great, when's the second issue? And I was like, I forgot to do the second issue. Like, I was just like, it was so hard to pull teeth to get the first issue out. But I was like, yeah, I gotta get this out. So I sent it around at some point to different publishers. And Platinum Studios was one of the publishers that contacted me back. And they said, we love this. And I was like, will you publish it? And they were like, no. But they were like, but we need you to draw some other thing for us. And they were like, here's 3 scripts. I mean, the deal with them was they were trying to get movies made.
Yeah.
They eventually didn't get a movie. It was Cowboys and Aliens
Oh yeah.
made. So,
Daniel Craig.
yeah, absolutely. But this one was called The Weapon, and it was like a kung fu kind of like a story set in Hawaii. And I just put everything I could into it, you know, like for $10 a page. I was just like, let's do this.
Burn and turn.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I worked really hard at it.
Yeah.
And then, but the book came out and it did pretty well. And then the writer had written the series like a few years before. And I had to get in touch with him to find something out. I didn't know what one particular thing was. I got in touch with him, and it turns out that he was working over at Marvel, and I was still doing inking and stuff like that at Marvel, but I couldn't get anybody interested in my pencils.
Yeah.
And then he was working on this one story. He asked for me to work on it. I started doing stuff for that. At the same time, I was doing all the inking, and I was just double timing that for about 3 or 4 years. Like,
Oh,
I get a
wow.
penciling assignment, and I do that. And then I get an inking assignment, I do that. So I was inking over George Perez and Keith Giffen at the same time that I was trying to build up
Penciling repertoire.
yeah, penciling repertoire. And eventually, like, I ditched it all. I started doing storyboards for about a year and still inking here and there. But my editor on some things that I'd done for Marvel Adventures line, the kids line, moved over to Deadpool. And he asked me to do some stuff there, and that's how I started working on Deadpool. The first story was a 80s flashback, and it was a lot of fun. And then there was some confusion about actually, it's in this book here, like, so like
yeah.
it was an 80s flashback kind of thing. And let's see if I can, yeah, here it is. So we did like a whole bunch of stories, like where
J. Jonah Jameson.
yeah, J. Jonah Jameson's there, and like Deadpool in like a like an 80s kind of costume, and it was Tony Stark was drinking himself to death, and Deadpool was responsible for him not drinking anymore. So
I'm sure that went over real well.
oh, actually it did. Well, it was funny. We were doing this story, and the when I handed in some of the pencils or the pages, the writer was like. It was Jerry Duggan and Brian Posehn, and they just started at Marvel like 3 months before.
Yeah, I'm a huge
and they
fan
were
of
like,
Jerry.
oh, absolutely. They're both fantastic. And they were like, we're going to get fired. Over this. And I was like, well, let's go out in a blaze of glory. So, and then we did a 70s one, a 60s one, 50s, 90s one. Like we just kept like pumping them out. And then that really triggered like a lot of like fun for me trying to ape different styles.
Yeah.
Like that was a lot of work. So
That's
yeah,
why you're a
yeah.
chameleon. You can do it all.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, you can see
yeah,
even
yeah.
as the issues
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
progress. It's
Yeah, there was different things
There's
in there.
different-
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I did a
completely-
different thing for the Deadpool 2099. Like I tried to do like I did essentially like a 16-panel grid.
wow.
On that one. Like
16 panel grid?
16 panel. Yeah, every page
Wow.
it was broken into 4s. So if you look
It's
closely,
beautiful.
like every page is broken into 4 panels,
Yeah.
and then of course I would play around with it within that. So, But yeah, we did a whole bunch of really great stuff. I was really proud of it. So
That's amazing.
yeah, we did one issue where it was all in crayon.
No way.
Yeah. I penciled it all, and then I sent it over to the colorist, and he was like, "Can I do this in crayon?" And I was like, "Yeah." And the editor was like, "Of course." And yeah, he printed them out. There's a picture of him like on a coffee shop, like just like putting it all in crayon, and I was like, "This is great."
That's like the dream job for a kindergartner.
Oh, absolutely.
You're like, I'm never gonna like this. I get to do this for a living. When I get older.
Oh, well, that's the greatest thing about Deadpool is that really like anything that you thought of, you could do.
Yeah.
And you weren't gonna break the character. I thought for sure some of these things were just gonna break. Like, you know, people would be like, all right, I'm done. And I'm done. Yeah. But no, it just really like fed into it. So even by the end of the time that I was there, when I did the Deadpool 300 cover, like I realized I was responsible for like 20 of them. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's a testament to how much you worked and how long.
Yeah. I did it for 5.5 years. Yeah. So
But
Deadpool is great. I remember even like I started working before the movies came out, and I remember sitting on a panel, and these people were just coming up, and they were like, "We want a Deadpool movie." Like, you know, when they would come to the audience, you know, the microphone, they would go like, "What's your question?" They'd be like, "When's the Deadpool movie going to come out?" And I was like, "You're never going to get a Deadpool movie." And then the next person would come up and be like, "Well, when the Deadpool movie comes out, I totally want it to be rated R." And I was like, "You're never going to get a rated R Deadpool movie? Are you high?" So I was like, "It's never going to happen." Like, I remember literally like, and then sure enough, like 2 years later, like there it was.
You're like,
and I was like,
here's the test footage. Like,
oh yeah. Well, it was amazing. Yeah. The test footage got leaked somehow, and
leaked, quote unquote.
Yeah. Well, leaked, you know, and then like someone got it out there. God bless that person, because it worked out well.
Worked out really well.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I mean, it was just a great project. And like Deadpool was just the movie was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing about Deadpool, there's no year one.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's you meet the character in res.
Yeah.
You know, in the middle of his own story. So like, I was amazed that they got like an origin story out of him. And then the second one was great too. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the third one. Let's do it.
I know, right? Let's go.
Yeah.
It's interesting because even though Rob kind of created Deadpool,
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, he did create Deadpool. Him and
Fabian Nicieza, yeah.
They both created him, but it was, I think he really kind of got his personality more on like Joe Kelly's run. Like,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, every person that worked on Deadpool added a lot to it. Yeah. I mean, there was even times when Deadpool was from Ohio and not Canada.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch. Well, if you actually look at the arc of the character, it's not until Frank Thierry comes along that you get the Deadpool that everybody knows now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like he's still cracking wisecracks and he's still kind of like crazy, but he's not Bugs Bunny. Like the Joe Kelly kind of stuff, he's kind of Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
And then Frank really grounds him in like really like a pathos that you know, a gritty kind of world that worked out. And then Gail Simone also went off of it too. So I think that like around that time, around 2003 or something like that, he really cemented into what I think everybody thinks of as Deadpool now.
Yeah.
But it took a while. Like, you know, he wasn't ugly at first. Like, you know, we never saw him with a mask for like a couple years.
Yeah.
You know, and then you find out he's hideously ugly, and then like there's a time period where he's like dating Siren, and that made no sense to me whatsoever. It's just like, that one is crazy. I put her in the wedding when I did the wedding cover. Like I put her in as one of the bridesmaids because I was like, this makes no sense that she was ever dating him, and nobody ever brings it up.
So
they never talk about it anymore. You know what I mean? Like even when she's like floating around in a different book,
like,
they never bring up. Yeah, no, we're good.
No, we're good. We do, you know.
Yeah.
We all have that one crazy ex, and we're like, what were we thinking?
Yeah. So yeah, that's the truth.
I love it. Well, after you wrapped on Deadpool, I mean, after 5.5 years.
Yeah, 5.5 years. It was a long time. Yeah.
You moved over to a few other books.
Yeah, I did an arc of Spider-Man Renew Your Vows, which was a lot of fun. Like I kind of approached it as a little airier, kind of like lighter kind of side. And
more of like a traditional Spider-Man, like from the 90s or the early 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and he had a kid, you know what I mean? So like it was a little lighter kind of style. And then I worked on the Many Deaths of Scott Koblish, which I got out there. So that one was a lot of fun. So that one came out in May. You can get it on Amazon or any bookstore that's around. There's a whole bunch of really fun little strips. So basically it's like 4-panel strips or 8-panel strips of just me dying over and over again for 96 pages.
Sounds like
for
fun.
everybody's amusement. Exactly. Yeah.
How did this book come to be?
Well, I was leaning into the things that I was afraid of. So like, I would sit there and I would go like, I would just worry about my own death, and
As we all do.
As we all do. I mean, honestly, like whole religions are built around that panic.
Yeah.
So I was just really, I was having a bit of a crisis. I was really anxious about it, and then I thought, well, the thing that I do, no matter what, is draw. So I was like, why don't I draw my way out of this? And I just started doing these little drawings. And then I would post them on like the social media there, and then my friends were just like, "That's awesome that you died that way," And I was like, "Oh, that's great," And then they would just laugh and they would go like, "That's fantastic," And they were really into it. And occasionally I'd put up like a real sad one, and I'd get like, it's just the equivalent of people just going like, you okay? But the ones that were funny, like everyone seemed to really like come out of the woodwork for them.
Yeah.
I'd get like hundreds of like likes on it, and I was just like, well, that's awesome. And then a friend of mine worked up at Chronicle Books, and she was like, hey, do you really want to do this? Like, we can do this as a book. And I was like, that's great, let's do it. So it came out recently. They had great designers and they have a great staff, and so we put it out.
And the book is so much fun.
Yeah, the book's a lot of fun. Yeah, you can pick it up on Amazon still. Pretty good price on Amazon right now.
Yeah.
Barnes & Noble, any place. Chronicle Books, the bookstore itself. So it's a lot of fun, yeah.
It's funny because, on Amazon, one of the tricks you have is, I didn't learn this till recently, but if you want to sell more on Amazon, if you get more than 20 reviews...
Okay.
It plugs into an algorithm.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no kidding.
And it gets you recommended for other books.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, really? I didn't know that.
So
I have like 10 reviews. I got to push it. Okay.
And now you're
right.
like, oh, wait, it's how many reviews for this? And then all of a sudden you'll get them. And then all of a sudden when someone buys like Deadpool, like they'll be like, do you also want to buy the many deaths?
No kidding, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
And so it's
I got to get that to happen. So, all right. So go pick up the book. Like you can get it on Amazon and then review it. And then like we'll get up to 20. All right. Let's do this.
Because that's what it's about. It's about like the word of mouth too, and getting and understanding how those systems work, because there's a whole marketing system behind them that as creators we don't really know about.
Well, that's it. I don't know any of this stuff. Like I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a book author, Barbara Hambley, and like we were talking about the stuff that she does. She'll do like little short stories on Amazon for like $5, on characters that she'd created for other books, and like that's she makes like money doing that. It's just it's all. I had done comics for so long that I really didn't know like how the book world kind of works.
Yeah.
So now I know. All right. Well, I got like there's 10 reviews up there now.
Now
so
it's
I
time
got
to go get them to the next 10
yeah.
and make it happen. It's really interesting.
I'll get
because
my mom to put up a.
but that's what it is you have to go out there with like, for me personally, when I have a book come out and like I'm like, okay, I got to get the work out this. It's a super uncomfortable thing. To go and be like, hey, like,
I'm awesome. Yeah.
Do you have you seen my book? Can you write a review for it? Yeah. But you realize that the people who are your friends who like back you are the ones who like not only enjoy backing you, but they like take pride in it. They're like,
absolutely.
Thank you for asking me. Like, it was my pleasure.
That's a really good way of putting it. That's a really nice way of putting it. Yeah, you really do. Well, even just the past couple months, like all my friends have been super important to me. So like, yeah, that's true.
You realize that it's like, oh, they come to bat for you, and they like are there for you just to even write a review. They don't have to buy your book, but they can write a review, and they'll be like, absolutely, like this cost me nothing, and I got to help out my friend. He feels good. I feel good. It's a win-win for everybody.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'll have to. Yeah, there's a virtuous circle that happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'll have to try and like push that to make it happen. Yeah.
I love it. And all right, I have one final question for you.
Sure.
What advice do you have for anyone who wants to be the next up-and-coming artist to break into comics?
I used to recommend people not do it. I'd gone through like a period of time where I was cranky about everything, and I would just kind of say, "Oh, don't! You really don't want to." But I think that what happens is that there's just something you can't let go of. And my form of communication, and a lot of people's form of communication, is to draw it out and tell a narrative and a story. And that's a skill that's not usual. I mean, it usually starts out as, I think it's almost like a pathology. Like, you just can't get across stuff verbally that you can. Like, I'll sit, when someone asks me where to go, like, I'll draw out a map. You know what I mean? I'll say, you go this way, this way, that. Rather than say, like, oh, you make a left or you make a
right,
yeah,
and go
make a turn
straight.
right. So there's something about the visual medium that helps people understand things quickly and
in a meaningful way.
And yeah, in a meaningful way. And I think that the advice that what winds up happening for people who do think that way and certainly draw that way is that persistence is really the key. You know, it depends on where you are in your path. Because the thing about art is it's not a destination; it's an actual path. Like, you're always on that road. You never finally arrive. You'll have little, points along the way. Like, you'll have, like, this book comes out,
of course,
but it's almost like a snapshot in time.
You never feel like you've made it and I'm done I've created my epic and that's that.
You'll never. Yeah. You keep going. Even Alan Moore still writes comics.
Exactly.
So, like, but the thing that happens is that the advice is different for everybody in a different part of their trip. So if they're a little kid, like, you just tell them, keep going. You know what I mean? Because it's really frustrating. You have to get into the habit of drawing all the time and every day. That's the advice you give someone who's starting out. The advice that you give to somebody who's been doing it for a long time but doesn't quite have certain skills like the anatomy or the pacing and storytelling, like those realms of advice are different. So you'll say, like, pick up this book on anatomy or take some anatomy classes, like model drawing classes, storyboard classes, in order to tell a story effectively. So the advice is different along those lines. People who are starting out, like, you're going to get different advice on how to, like, try and, like, say, okay, you've got your first story down, you've published it. Like, where do you want to go next? Do you want to work for one of the majors? Do you want to continue to do work for yourself? If you want to continue to do work for yourself, you have to learn all those things, like getting like 20 reviews, like, if you want to do stuff for the majors, you got to figure out what an editor wants. Do you know what I mean? And then even from those things, it's not the first job you get, it's the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. Because again, it's a path.
Of course.
You're not taking one step, you're taking a million.
Yeah.
So, and then even at the end, like, recently, my advice to my people around that have been around as long as I've been around, like 5 years or more, like, my advice is to let go. Like, you've been clenching the entire time because you're nervous and you're trying to get your stuff across and you're trying to learn who you are. But the best advice at that point is just to let go and try and just let go of the anxieties that you've built up around not being good enough, right? Because everybody's got
we all
that.
have that.
Yeah, so the thing to do at that point is to sort of say, like, look, I'm okay if I reveal myself every day this way, it's going to be all right, so yeah, there's different advice that you would give to everybody in a different time. So
I love it. I mean, that's all great advice. You throughout your entire career, you have different forms of advice, and you're always growing. And
because you're not the same person you were at the beginning. You're not the same person you were in the middle.
Absolutely. So I actually have one more question for you.
Yeah, fire away.
So, what was a time in comics when you thought that it was too difficult, or it wasn't going to, like, you didn't think you were going to make it in comics? Like, at what point were you kind of like, okay, like, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I got to go back to selling bloopers.
Yeah, selling bloopers and videotapes. There were two times. There was around 2000. Marvel had a bankruptcy a few years before, and it had gone down. When I started at Marvel, there was 125 books out that month in, like, August.
Wow.
And by the time that I left Marvel, even left New York, I remember looking up at the board and they had 35 comics out that month. And I'd inked like 2 of them. And I thought, well, this can't really last. And I got that opportunity to go to Stanley Media. And then when I got back into comics, there was a period of time in around 2008, 2009, where I was out of work for about 9 weeks. And that was brutal because as a cartoonist, you don't have, there's no like unemployment or there's no like, once you're just working project to project. So that was a brutal one for me. But they were just because like there wasn't enough work. It wasn't because I was like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. It was just that there wasn't enough work. So for me, like comics, and I always came back to it because for me, comics is the thing. It's how I speak.
Yeah.
You know, it's how I interpret the world and how I give back to it. You know, there's very few skills that I have. You know, music I can sing. You know, and I can play guitar, but like, it's really the art that I speak through. You know, so the most. So that's if you want to be able to speak, you've got to be able to speak the way that you do it.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah.
I love it. Where can people find you on the internet and
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. I usually say hi. And then Twitter, there's a Tumblr out there. They're all usually under my name, Scott Koblish. So, or some variation. I think on Twitter it's at Koblish because I picked up the Twitter thing early and never used it, and so I didn't know enough to put Scott Koblish down. There is someone poached Scott Koblish like on Twitter.
They took it right on.
They did, but what I do is whenever I'm like advertising something, I'll like boost the signal by linking them in.
Oh, nice.
You know, I'm like, hey, you know, let's use them too.
Yeah.
It's in China somewhere. That
really, they're just like they're
absolutely.
running with it.
Yeah, they just grabbed it, but I'm like, let's boost the signal. Let's do it. Yeah,
I love it.
So
make sure to check out the Many Deaths of Scott Koblish and a lot of the other Deadpool books and give them reviews on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, have a good day, everybody. Yeah. Like, really. And have a good, it's Christmas. It's almost Christmas. Have a good Christmas. Come on. It's snowing. It's beautiful out. It's cold.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.